Hi, everybody. I'm Debbie Atuk. I'm a Bering Straits Native Corporation shareholder and a portfolio specialist for Skyview Investment Advisors. Please be sure to watch to the end for an important disclaimer. This series is a series of interviews that I'm doing to explore the economic opportunities and challenges for business development in Alaska, primarily for the Alaska Native corporations. Today is my honor to be able to speak with Susan Bell, who has spent her career doing research to bring economic opportunities to Alaska. Susan Bell is currently the CEO of McDowell Group, a subsidiary of McKinley Capital, and is the largest and oldest economic research firm in Alaska. Some of the large projects that Susan has either advised on or consulted on include the Alaska Marine Highway Strategic Plan, a major project for the Bristol Bay Native Association, the state's renewable and traditional energy resources, and a site expansion at Icy Strait Point in Huna. I'm excited about that. Susan has also served as vice president for Goldbelt, the Juneau Village Native Corporation, and the commissioner of the Alaska Department of Commerce. Welcome, Susan.
Well, thank you very much, Debbie.
I'm so glad you're here. One shareholder to another, Bering Straits and Sitnazoc, right? We're both shareholders in both the same corporations. Well, I shared with you some ideas of some things we could talk about, and what we decided we would get started with was where you're at now and some of your experience in the region, in the Bering Straits region.
Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, I'm with McDowell Group, and it's an organization that was founded in 1972, bringing it with our ANCSA corporations, a nearly 50-year horizon of serving clients in Alaska and in the Northwest. And it's part of what really brings me to this work is that I had come in on the client side and had been advised on projects about markets, about feasibility studies. And I found that work really gratifying. And I came originally in 2001. And as you mentioned, I did spend 5 years serving as commissioner of the Department of Commerce, and there might be time to talk about that today. But I came back about 5.5 years ago, having had that experience, and just redoubled my commitment to this organization. I'm really excited about the work we do. And our array of work really does span the state. I'm in our Juneau office, but some of the work that we've done in the Nome region includes work for the Port of Nome. That particularly was timely as Army Corps of Engineers was making its decisions about Arctic Port, and the port needed to update some of its planning documents to reflect that. Last year, we did a big body of work with COERIC, and we brought in our team that does program evaluations and needs assessment on things related to childcare and early learning, and that was a very rewarding project. We've also worked with Sitnazoc and Bering Straits Native Corporation as well on some small projects throughout the years too. So I particularly enjoy working when I have an opportunity to either travel to Nome or at least be focusing on the area where my family's from.
I like that so much. So I believe I have this right. It's your uncle George Bell who was like the first chairman of the board.
Well, my father George was an incorporator of Bering Straits Native Corporation. At the time, he was a banker, young in his career. Our family moved from Nome to Fairbanks in 1970, and he continued to serve in a banking capacity. My mom was a teacher, but yeah, he was an incorporator. And when I think back, I was a child at the time. When I think back at what that meant in terms of the work, the unknown, it's really extraordinary to think, each organization, each individual, what they were doing to pioneer something that now has so much visibility and so much opportunity.
It is really amazing. So your family moved back at about the same time that my dad moved back. He and I just recorded an interview, and he talked about the sequence of events that led him to go back in 1971 to begin working at the corporation. He was working in the land department, and it is interesting to start to look back now, 50 years back. And you mentioned that in the opening that it's been 50 years now, and so these Alaska Native corporations have certainly evolved, and I'm glad to see that they've evolved to the point where they can use the research, like economic research firms like McDowell Group, to do serious, like big work the projects that you mentioned are significant, and that's exactly what I think the intent was, to be able to provide some of the work that you did for Queric, which is on the social side, the nonprofit side, which is not in the purview for the for-profits. But I'm glad to hear that they're doing such important work for our communities, making sure that early childhood development is being taken care of in rural Alaska. As we know, that's something that is an early predictor of success in life, is whether or not children have access to that. So I'm so glad to hear that you worked on that. Well, I wanted to make sure that we talked about some of the current events. One of the projects that you've worked on is the expansion of Icy Strait in Huna. And that's a big project, and I've been reading about it. And I can't believe the numbers. Like, the expectation was pre-COVID, I think, that this year they were expecting 400 boats. And of course, that didn't happen, big boats. But I was wondering if we could talk about when you worked on that site expansion project, if you developed it with a mind to include or to provide a pathway for small businesses to develop around the site expansion, or just talk about that project and its evolution in general.
Absolutely. And it's over the years, there's been many projects that we've conducted for the Village Corporation is Huna Totem Corporation, and they're based in Huna, Alaska, very close to Juneau. By statewide standards, 15-minute flight or a couple hours on a boat. And their corporate office, they have an office here in Juneau as well. And our relationship with the corporation began before Icy Strait Point. But if you look back at about 15 years ago, when they were initially conceiving of investment in their home community, there's a cannery that they had acquired. It operated until fairly recently, but a beautiful setting. They own the land around it, beautiful cannery, and the intention was to create a cruise ship destination. Cruise ship, the visitor industry is significant to Alaska, but particularly in Southeast with the cruise ships. And as we began to serve their organization, we were involved in the initial feasibility studies for that work. That helped them secure grants from EDA and others. Certainly the corporation invested in the cannery itself. And as the destination began to develop, from being a small number of cruise ships to now, as you mentioned, what was anticipated for this year would have been over 400,000 cruise passengers. So really significant growth. The destination itself not only showcases the cannery, but it has to be really equivalent from a passenger and cruise ship. They have to be able to provide enough entertainment and opportunity and cultural experiences, tours to take place in a cruise ship itinerary, just like any other port. So Skagway, Juneau, Ketchikan, Haines. So some of the things that they've done over the years, the whale watching is extraordinary in that area, as is the bear viewing. So having wildlife viewing opportunities are certainly appeal. The adventure element of what they offer is really exciting. This summer they completed one and are completing a second gondola.
They have the zip line course. Is that the first?
The zip line course is in place. From kayaking and biking and hiking. There's been an array of activities that are available to passengers. So part of what I really think about, again, our work through the years began from those initial feasibility studies to economic impact studies, helping them show in the community their employment opportunities, their impact. They're a significant taxpayer, helped increase overall economic development. Also, back to your point, by creating business opportunities on the site for small businesses to offer tours, retail, sell some of the crafts and food products that are manufactured in the area, as well as business opportunities in the community. The Icy Strait Point is just a short few-minute drive from downtown Huna, but I think that it's been really clear as we look at the tour operators, retail opportunities, transportation providers, that there's been a lot of development throughout the whole community, not just at the destination. So
And how much, if I can interject for a second, how much of that has included what I guess we would call cultural tourism or walking tours? Is that something that they have put in place, or is that still something that is to be developed?
Because the destination was developed by Huna Totem Corporation, their cultural, the community and the people's history and cultural identity, I think, is really clear. It's an aspect, I think, of it's an aspect of the experience that is really central. So while they are, while guests are able to, as I mentioned, maybe go bear viewing or whale watching or something, they have the opportunity to learn about the history of the community, the people, the culture. Part of how that happens is that the percentage of local hire is very, very high. So it's an employment opportunity for community members, for corporation shareholders. It's been around long enough that there's sort of a second generation. People's kids are now employees, and so if it's a traditional cooking class, people may have an opportunity to learn about the local foods, but also there is that, learning about how people live today as well as traditionally, that just, I think, makes the destination really unique amongst other ports in Alaska.
I noticed that the partnership, the press release for the partnership that did the expansion, that the cruise ship line made sure to mention that they said that the cultural element, I'm not going to get this quote right, I don't have it written down, but that it was, you couldn't buy the cultural authenticity. And I was wondering if, I've traveled in the Caribbean some, and it seems like many ports of call look identical. And I was wondering, do the people who take cruises to Alaska, are they different than the people who take cruises to the Caribbean? Do they look for more cultural aspects to their ports of call? I mean, rather than just getting off the boat and going shopping at the same shops that the cruise lines own at all of the ports of call.
Well, some of the things that are real clear motives for coming to Alaska are, adventure, natural beauty, wildlife viewing. I think that learning about Alaska's people and culture is something that I think it really enriches people's experience. For some, it's very high in their motives. For others, again, some of these big things about, they're very interested in the natural beauty and the adventure. But as they come to Alaska and have an opportunity to engage with people, I think those are the things that really enrich their experience. And so back to Icy Strait, it's how they've defined, how they've helped make that port experience very unique. And I think
I'm really glad to hear that. I think that that's something that is kind of the holy grail for some of our destinations around Alaska, where Anchorage did it right. Anchorage created the Center for Alaska Native Culture, the Alaska Native Cultural Center.
Heritage Center, yeah.
The Alaska Native Heritage Center, thank you. So they did that. And I think they did that pretty successfully, bringing people in. And my family's dance group has had the opportunity to perform, to have a couple of weeks per summer. Not currently, but we've done it in the past. And we've been there for like an entire weekend and doing like 3 shows a day. And not only doing the dancing, but also doing some talking and some sharing and teaching in between. And there's definitely some people that are more interested than others. But and I think that was a model that if you may not, you probably do know, like Jane Ingvig, and I don't remember who else was so involved with getting that off the ground. But my understanding was that they had actually modeled that after the Hawaiian Cultural Center, the Polynesian Cultural Center in Hawaii. I might not have that right.
I'm not as familiar with its history, but I certainly get there often for, conferences and events and forums that are held there. It's a real asset for our state. And
it really is. They had a recent fundraiser, which I want to make sure that if people have been to the Alaska Native Heritage Center, that they have been doing some fundraising, because COVID has reduced the number of visits this year. So I really want to put in a plug for the work that they're doing over there to make sure that they are able to keep their programming in place, their staff in place for when they can reopen. I want to make sure that we have time to talk about some of the other questions that I had, and these have more to do with specifically with projects you did in Juneau with Goldbelt and the tram. And I was wondering if there were any takeaways from that experience that you could talk about in terms of securing public and private funding. I mean, what we just talked about with Icy Strait, they have certainly done some of that, but at Juneau, at Goldbelt, was the tram financed partially with public funds and partially with private?
Well, and I came to Goldbelt in 1998. I was there for 3 years, and the tram had been constructed. Part of what Goldbelt did, at the time that I was there, Joe Beadle was the president and CEO. I was one of the vice presidents, and it was a huge time of expansion. And much of what we did was through partnerships. At the time, the corporation was really committed to investing in the region, creating employment opportunities for shareholders and regional members, and also definitely having a return, financial return on the investments. Its visitor industry experience grew considerably. At that time, there was the acquisition of the Goldbelt Hotel, a facility across the street called the Cedro Marine Complex, which had moorage for small ships, office space, and base of operations for Glacier Bay Tours and Cruises, which was not under my direction, but another significant investment at the time. The tramway was a partnership with investors that had experience in trams and the ski industry, and then Goldbelt became the sole owner in 1998. Concurrent, the decision had been made by the board, but it was concurrent with my coming to the organization. So we really needed to be sure that we recruited people that, as we were going forward, that could ensure the safe operations and high level of customer service, but know that they were going to help build the skill within the corporation to continue operating it. And here we are now almost 25 years later, where, again, safe operation, expansion of it's a tramway that goes up, downtown Juneau, but the facility at the top of the mountain has grown and expanded, as visitor volume has grown and as their experience has grown in responding to what people are looking for. So now there's a small adventure center, Raptor Center. They've continued to develop the trails, and they've invested also, back to your point about cultural, with time, there's been an increasing number of things like, traditional art, totem poles, and other things that are there that, have been built, not only as an opportunity to engage visitors, so that you might have a carver or you might have someone doing some skin sewing or other things. So it's an opportunity to engage visitors, increase their understanding of traditional life and arts, and some of these things are now on display, and increase what people can experience and learn about, which then in turn may increase their interest in purchasing items or exploring that more fully, or so it builds. I guess that's my main point, is that the destination and the attractions that we've been talking about have really not only responded to changes in kind of visitor interest, but reinvested in themselves. And I think that's really important.
That's an interesting point. So I had the opportunity to get a tour of the Adventure Center, not the Adventure Center, the Raptor Center, the walking trails, to see where the carver who was on site at the time, he wasn't there, but there was a work in progress. I got to see that, and it is I think a beautifully done site. And then Ben Cornell, is that his name? He said that they could conceivably accommodate twice as many people per day if they built another tram. So they have lots of opportunity to expand, as I understand it. Again, that was pre-COVID, so we'll see what happens. You have any idea about what's going to happen to cruise traffic? Some people are questioning whether or not Americans will be willing to get back on cruise ships. I am ever the optimist on that, and I think, yes, as soon as we get the okay, people are going to pile back onto those boats because people love cruises.
People do enjoy cruising. We see in our market research for individual communities over the state that there's there are people who cruise to Alaska on their first trip and then maybe have a better sense of the destination and come back as independent visitors. There's also people who come back cruising because they really enjoy, they enjoy the ease, they enjoy the entertainment, they enjoy the engagement with others on board. So it is definitely popular. I think that what's been clear is that, the industry has signaled this, that for businesses, this was supposed to be a record year for businesses to really have a longer horizon. It's not about recovery in 2021, to really look at their business model. And it's going to be probably a few years, but I think there's a confidence. It's just that it's going to be both economic and safety that have to work together. And so I think it's fair to say that we'll probably see a few year horizon to get back to the kind of levels that people had.
But you're optimistic that it will return. I want to switch to the time that you spent, and I wasn't sure if we'd get to this, but let's see what we have in time. We have a few more minutes. So when you were working at the state of Alaska as a Department of Commissioner, you were responsible for enhancing the business climate in Alaska. Is that truly your job description, or?
Well, one, I enjoyed that opportunity. I learned a tremendous amount. The Department of Commerce, Community and Economic Development's a mouthful, but it has it doesn't roll off the tongue, commerce, but it has a number of entities in the state that engage with businesses and community. And so that from community and regional affairs, where there's a lot of work with small communities, either in grant administration or training on, just community operations like elections and, just basic community functions, to bigger entities like the Alaska Railroad is one of the agencies in the Department of Commerce, the Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute, the state's tourism marketing programs, also Alaska Energy Authority. And at the time that I was serving as commissioner, we had significant capital budgets. And so there was an opportunity through entities like Alaska Energy Authority to invest in communities through the Renewable Energy Program. A lot of training took place. So again, the array of entities that are part of Department of Commerce was a real privilege to be part of that sort of investment in infrastructure, investment in renewable energy, and also really trying to partner with businesses to promote Alaska internationally. So
tell me more about the stuff that you did internationally. What was the intent there? So you were trying to draw people to come and invest in the state from abroad, or?
Some of it was promoting our products and services and experiences. So, two of the bigger programs, when I think about from a marketing standpoint, ASME operated then in well over 20 countries. So the International Seafood Marketing Program had aspects that were targeted at directly at consumers. Some was more at food service organizations and restaurants. And again, being part of their programs was an easy story to tell, because we're proud of our state, but we're also really proud of our seafood. Excuse me. And I hit do not disturb there. Similarly, the state's tourism marketing program has a lot of business participation in it. And again, there's states, there's countries that we've had a long relationship with, from Asian countries to Australia to German-speaking Europe. So again, having a chance to be part of those, developing the marketing program, sometimes being part of their outreach. It was a privilege to stand there with other businesses and talk about what we offer, because it's just so easy to be proud of that.
It's incredible. Were you part of the contingency that went with Governor Walker to China, or were you already back at McDowell Group when he did that?
I served under Governor Parnell, but definitely had the opportunity to be in Asia, in German-speaking Europe, in the UK and other countries as part of our marketing efforts. It was also, some of the early years of the Gasoline Development Corporation, which was another agency in commerce. And certainly, as you mentioned, work has continued on that front since there. And Asia is an important market that's looked at for our energy.
I was wondering how much you think that this the state's economy has changed since you were in that position.
As I mentioned, we had resources through capital budgets and through program funding.
So that sounds like a change.
I still have a lot of friends that work, both in commerce and other state agencies. That it was really nice to be a part of the state at a time when we were building and investing. And certainly, we have a significant state government operation now that's still doing good work. But, the timing of my opportunity to serve was some pretty significant investment. And that was exciting because much of it was invested right in infrastructure and programs in our state. So I know it's more challenging, from a budget standpoint. And then certainly, as we've touched on, there are profound impacts across all industries from COVID, and so as we head into the fall and winter months and another budget cycle, I think it's going to be very, very challenging for policymakers to really navigate through this. But it's important work.
Needs or wants of their constituents and balance that with the budget shortfalls.
Yeah, but it's important work. It has to be done, and we rely on our state agencies in so many ways, from education to public safety to health to and through the pandemic, I think that we've all learned to really appreciate some of the frontline, not only our healthcare providers, but just even realizing that there's a person like Dr. Zink there who's, from a policy level,
I really appreciate Dr. Zink's updates. When I am on Facebook and I see that there's a live update going on, I try to catch that every chance I get. Before we... Oh, go ahead. Before we end, and I want to be mindful of the time, one of the questions that I wanted to get to was about how the Alaska Native corporations now contribute to the state budget and how they have increased in profile because they've become large entities. So they have more influence in the state, but they also significantly contribute to the state. What do you think some of the growth areas are for the Alaska Native corporations in state, or do you think that their best opportunities might lie outside of the state for growth?
For our Native corporations, each has had the opportunity to think about their own investment opportunities. Certainly some began with more natural resources, and I think one of the things that is unique is the wealth sharing that happens across the regional and village corporations. But I remain very optimistic about the growth opportunities in our state. We still have a wealth of resources. The Native corporations have not only a commitment to the state, but also an employment base through the shareholders and their community members, and also a land base. So all of those things together, that while certainly corporations have investment opportunities and revenue opportunities outside of the state, I am very bullish on what we can do here and our opportunities going forward. And they're key, and it's
certainly one of the things
of pride
that I think will contribute. I'd like to touch on your parent corporation, as McKinley Capital has been able to receive half of the allocation for the Alaska Permanent Fund's in-state private equity mandate. So that's $100 million. Well, it's $200 million altogether. That is meant to be invested within the state or for the benefit of state residents. But I really hope that money is invested in state and that they don't use that as a way to put money into other states that might have some products flow to Alaska. I think that's it's a little bit squishy. So I really hope that the businesses, that there's some strong businesses locally that are going to be able to access those funds. I'm keeping my fingers crossed about that.
Well, and as you mentioned that, it was just about a year ago that they were, the announcement from the Alaska Permanent Fund Corporation selected McKinley Capital and Barings. And so, I know they've been very hard at work on the due diligence. And it was only in January that we announced publicly that McDowell Group had been acquired by McKinley Capitals. And just, as we go forward, I think that their commitment to the state is high, and and our acquisition was part of their diversification and focus on Alaska. So it's an exciting time to be not only at McDowell Group, but it's an exciting time to be part of this larger organization and what they're doing.
Well, I think this is the perfect place to stop.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.